Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today I've got a lovely lady. Her name is Tabitha Jane. She's a relationship transformation coach. And today we're going to be discussing how to overcome trust issues. Now, you may not actually think you have trust issues, but I can assure you that with all our experience and expertise, to some degree, we are finding it's very common, especially for women in today's society who are maybe single or even in relationships, to be experiencing trust issues and not know how to overcome those. So Tabitha, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. I'm excited.
Me too. So Tabitha, before we get into discussing how to overcome trust issues, can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what led you to doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, thank you. So just briefly, I knew I wanted to be a coach for a long time. I did my NLP practitioner about 15 years ago, and I retrained as a coach 10 years ago, and I started a personal development group for women. So women's empowerment has been my thing from the outset. I very much fell into business coaching after my previous corporate career, and everything was going quite well until 6 years ago when I heard those fateful words from my husband at the time, who I'd been with for 17 years and utterly adored. Those fateful words of, "I don't think I love you anymore." And within a month, he was gone. And it felt like a hot poker to my heart. I literally felt a physical heartbreak in my chest. And it was from that point on that I went on to work on myself even more, to look at how to magnetize the right relationship, because what I realized quite quickly is, yes, I wanted him, but to be attached to that would cause me lots of pain. So I became clear and attached to the type of relationship I wanted, and wanted it to be him, but was open to the fact that it might not be, which led me on a many years search and my dating journey. And I'm really understanding relationships, really understanding masculine and feminine energy, because I never wanted to be in the situation again where I felt completely blindsided and in that situation. So it's not about never feeling heartbreak or loss again. It's about being able to deal with it in a way that's with love, rather than being shocked and devastated and not really knowing what to do with myself. So yeah, that's my story. And about a year ago, I rebranded with my maiden, well, it's not my maiden name, it's actually my first and second name, Tabitha Jane. And I want to, I really want to reduce suffering. You know, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. And I see so much suffering in the world. Our divorce rate is up to 42%, and it's increasing. And more and more people, especially after the pandemic, are just really struggling in their intimate relationships, and a lot of single women struggling to attract the right man. And I want to help with all of that with the work that I do.
Excellent, love it. So Tabitha, talking about how to overcome trust, did you have that as an issue in your relationship, or is this something you found is a common issue with the clients that you work with?
So trust was never an issue for me. In fact, when my husband, leading up to our marriage breakdown, he was acting very strange. And if you were to write it all on a card, it would be the classic symptoms or signs of him having an affair. And one of my close friends at the time said, "Oh, we should follow him into London and see what he's doing." And even at that point, I was like, well, that's not really going to help me. And if that's what he's doing, that's what he's doing. But I think for me, trust came later on when I was dating and trusting my own instincts, trusting myself with red flags and seeing that through and saying no, rather than, you know, looking out and saying they've got potential. And as the more coaching I've done specifically around relationships, trust has come up a lot, especially with online dating, where a lot of women have had not very good experiences, and have experienced people lying and being deceitful. That then, you know, there's trusting themselves and there's thinking that they can't even trust people they meet. So it just becomes it's become a massive thing.
And how do you think that's actually impacting them, you know, once they've had that breach of trust, so to speak, or had a few breaches of trust? And how do you think that then subsequently affects them then attracting a relationship that is going to be healthy and that they do trust?
So I think what happens is we just close down. You know, it's like, well, you suddenly create this limiting belief that you can't trust anybody, and ultimately what that means is you're going to grow old and maybe be quite lonely, and you're not going to attract someone. Or ironically, when you're in the space and that energy of not trusting, you will just then start attracting more and more people not to trust, because that's the energy you're in. That's what you're focusing on, is that, you know, people aren't trustworthy and will lie to you, which means your focus is going to be on that, and you're going to attract people that lie to you. So it's almost like I can't think of the word, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah,
it's what
absolutely.
I've noticed. Yeah,
because what you focus on actually is what you then attract, isn't it? So rather than attracting what you do want, you're attracting what you don't want.
100%, absolutely.
So what do you think are the common things that happen, you know, whilst we're dating or whilst we're in relationships that cause a lack of trust?
So if I start with single women, I think where online dating has become so prominent, it's become a very easy way to meet people, and with the pandemic as well, not being able to actually go out and mingle, it's definitely pushed more and more people online. And I think, you know, there are people, and it's not just men, women do it too. I've had just as many complaints from men about women putting filters on their pictures, being catfished, you know, so things like lying about your age, putting up old pictures, maybe not saying you have children, not saying you want children, all that kind of thing. And then obviously you've got the obvious thing, like people going on there who are actually in relationships, so they're cheating because they just want to have sex with people without paying for it. You know, that, I think that's what's kind of led to a lot of trust issues in the kind of early stages, people not being honest about what they want. Another thing I've noticed with single women is they say to me they want a serious relationship, yet they're going online saying, oh yeah, you know, I'm just being really casual, and actually, not that you want to go on there and say, I'm looking for a husband, I want to marry someone like next week, but at the same time being clear that it is a relationship you want, not just a bit of fun. And I think women do give off the wrong signals without realizing it, which then makes them feel like they can't trust the guy because then he's just wanting that one thing. And then from a relationship point of view, I think there's a lot to be said around trusting the other person with our emotions. So women are looking for obviously physical safety, but they're also looking for emotional safety, and to feel safe to be able to open up and be vulnerable to their partners. And I think it can become a common thing where you don't trust your partner to open out to, but what generally has happened is there's been this disconnect. Something's created a disconnect with themselves and or in the relationship, and then they try and get vulnerable and then don't get the response they're expecting because they haven't built the connection before opening out, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think that can happen with trust, and there's like different levels of trust. You know, I talk to women and they'll go, well I trust my husband to look after our children and feed them and look after and keep them safe, but I wouldn't trust him with telling him what's really going on for me emotionally, you know. So there's different kinds of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you handle that question then if you've got a woman saying they trust their partner with one particular aspect of their life but not with another?
Well, as you and I know, Lynn, it's not about the other person.
Yes, exactly.
It's about them. So really I would try and understand where that stems from. So at what point did they start not trusting them? Because generally there's a catalyst or several events that have led to them making that decision. So it's never just one thing. So I kind of look at the external situation and events that have happened that have led to that, and what they've made that mean, and checking in and almost challenging those beliefs and like, are they really true? And then of course we've got unconscious self-sabotaging going on, which is something else I do in my coaching program, which I help clear, which is a program that's been running since early childhood. And that can often affect how we trust people. So I think it's looking at those three areas. And then, because I think once you understand where it's come from, self-awareness can often be enough to make a change. So when you become aware of it and you understand it, then you've got the power to change it. And then it becomes a decision and a choice. And trust is not one of those things that just happens overnight either way. The same as building a relationship and a relationship failing. None of those things happen in a couple of weeks. It takes time to build. Like, you can trust someone instantly, but not necessarily with everything. It is a phased approach. As the more you invest and the more that you trust, and it goes on and on and on. So yeah, it's just looking at also the impact it's having. If they're not trusting their partners in a certain area, then how can they, what impact is that having, and how much they want to change it. So it's also the leverage of how important it is for them to change it and what they're going to get if they do. Because ultimately, people's biggest fear with trusting is getting hurt. I don't want to trust that person. I don't want to do this because I might get hurt. And you know what? In love, that is the risk. That it's the payoff. Being vulnerable can be uncomfortable. Trusting doesn't mean someone's never going to hurt you, albeit not intentionally, because most people don't set out to hurt you intentionally. But it doesn't mean that won't happen. But it also means you're limiting yourself in how much love you can receive and how much joy you can experience in your life.
Yeah, and I think, like you said earlier on, we have to, take that risk, don't we, that we could get hurt if we, trust something about a specific person. But unless we take that leap of faith, we're never going to experience love at its highest level, in achieving that ultimate fulfillment, are we?
Definitely. I have clients and they're dating and I say, look, I don't know if this is going to work out. I have no idea. I don't have a crystal ball. Well, actually I do, but I don't use it in my client sessions. I don't know if something's going to work out, but what I do know is the more that they can be authentically themselves, and if they're clear about what they want and they've cleared some the old crap that's helped them back in the past, they've got a much better chance of really tuning into their own intuition, their own wisdom, trusting themselves. And also, which is a big thing, saying no, cutting things off when they're not working, because that's, I think, one of the biggest things is women not trusting their own judgment. They see the red flags. Like, you talk to any woman who's come out of a relationship that really wasn't right and they've had a rough time, if you go back and you say, what were the early signs, they always tell you what they were, but we ignore them. So it's looking at, why do you ignore them? And it sometimes it's a self-worth thing. They want the relationship more than they want to be single, so they'll forego those red flags. They have a belief that they can change it and make it better. There's a lot of us that like fixing, especially women who are really high mother energy and really nurturing. They just want to look after and they think they can change that person. And that's kind of almost one of the biggest mistakes. And by the way, I've done all these things throughout dating.
Me too.
That's how I know.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think you can quite often fall in love with the potential of somebody, especially if you do see them making efforts in the right direction. and sort of see the relationship through rose-tinted glasses, and then when there is a red flag, you sort of sweep it under the carpet because you think, well, you know what, I have seen, you know, some progression, so maybe this is just something that's a blip on the way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one thing I do talk about with my clients is qualification. So it's not saying, oh, you hear something and you're like, you're out, you're off, no, but it's just exploring it. And I think there's a fear to explore that because they don't want to scare them off. So for instance, I had a client who they said to her, oh, you know, you love being really sociable and you've got a really high powered job and you're really driven, and I'm leading more into my not retirement years but kind of pre-retirement years. He's slowing down, and she didn't, like, that turned out to be one of the things, but she didn't qualify it. She didn't say, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for us? What would that look like in our relationship? She didn't ask any questions. And when I asked her why she didn't, it actually came down to that she's fearful. She didn't want to scare him away. And I was like, but you'd have been better off scaring him away at those early stages than having the pain you had 2 months later when he dumped you.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can save yourself like you say, the suffering long term by sort of really tuning in and recognizing that if something is a red flag, then it's telling you something that needs to be healed or addressed, isn't it?
Yeah, and when I say red flags, it doesn't mean people immediately go to he's deceitful, cheating. I'm just talking about compatibility even. You know, say someone wants to get married, someone doesn't. Someone wants more children or wants children and doesn't. You know, they're potential deal breaker conversations if you do and they don't. Or if their distance is an issue, if there's other things that are an issue. Now, some things, you know, you hear the stories where people overcome all of that. And I do think that's true too. But still have the exploratory conversation, and the earlier you have it, the better, because it is a bit more challenging when you're more invested in the relationship. But if you can get that stuff dealt with really early on, like first couple of weeks, first couple of dates, it will save you a whole host of pain. But it's almost like women shy away from that because they don't want to scare them off. Yeah,
absolutely. Or, you know, we tend to forgive things that are unacceptable, you know, so if there is something that crops up that you think, actually, you know, that there's no way you should have spoke to me like that, they probably won't challenge it because they don't want to rock the boat, because they want to think they're being nurturing and kind and loving by forgiving that behavior, when really all they're doing is sending a message that is condoning the behavior and setting themselves up for probably receiving more of the same.
Yeah, and it's a bit like when you go to if you go to an interview for a job, generally that's the best dressed you'll ever be. That, you know, it's the best you'll be. And so if your first couple of dates are a bit ropey, it's probably not going to get any better. Likelihood it's not going to get better.
Yeah, and just know that, you know, you deserve the best. And the thing is that it's okay to set healthy boundaries and to, you know, actually say, you know what, that's unacceptable. I don't like what you said to me just now. I didn't, that really hurt, and it's not acceptable for me to hear that ever again from any person, let alone somebody that might turn out to be a long-term partner. And know that that's okay to say that, and don't be afraid to rock the boat, because actually you'll get more respect from somebody who genuinely is interested in you than not, if you do speak up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a big part of the work I do is helping women get into their power types. So when women are feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, they've got too much going on, they can end up falling into one of what I call Superwoman's evil cousins, which are bitch, martyr and victim. But I help women really get into their power through their queen, their warrioress, sorceress, lover and mother. And what I find very typical in these instances is not having good queen energy. So queen energy is not coming from a place of criticism. It's not aggressive. It's not masculine. It's really feminine. It's really powerful, but it's standing in that serenity, being clear about what you want, you know, prioritizing your needs and saying, this is what I need, but from a place of that soft power, which is really palatable to men. It won't feel like you're not banging heads with them. And that's a lot of what I teach, is helping women to do that and defending their boundaries. And of course, getting into their juicy lover energy, but that's another podcast.
Yeah, we'll do that one another time. But yeah, it is about setting those healthy boundaries and knowing that that's okay. And that's, if you're going to be attracting a good quality, high value male, they'll appreciate that. They might not necessarily instantly respond to that. If you they say that's not okay, they might not initially react or respond in a good way, but give them time to think about it. If you're in a relationship with a good guy is of high value, he'll recognize that, I crossed the line there and I need to apologize.
Exactly. And you do need to set boundaries, not just that's in any relationship. That's not even just men, that's children, parents, friends. It's exactly the same thing. But when it comes to the matters of the heart, I think, you find, again, same as me, in the workplace, really strong, really confident, really boundaried. And then you get into my love life and not so much nowadays, but years ago, I would definitely be a bit more of a walkover. It's like I turned to mush when it came to intimate relationships. And I think there's a lot of other women that I've noticed are similar too.
Yeah, I think we can get into that conditioning of being people pleasers, can't we? And like you say, being walked all over on the back of it, because and also, like you said earlier, that can come from the things that we experienced as children, or previous relationships, not necessarily the relationship you're currently in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always talk about hangovers and baggage. I mean, emotional baggage. We've all got it. We've all had other relationships that form our beliefs, positive or negative, empowering or limiting. And it's our job to find out what the limiting ones are to help you move forward and not let that spill and bleed into a new relationship. Because it's, again, women who say have been cheated on and then they get into a new relationship, they're automatically super suspicious. That it doesn't take a lot, and then they can actually lose a good guy because he won't put up with being constantly I suppose checked up on, because he's basing it on a previous relationship. And that goes both ways as well. It's common if you have had your trust broken, and that's just one example of trust broken. It's, I suppose, the most common and the one you think of when you think of it. But it doesn't mean the next person's, everybody is different, and you do have to start fresh with each person.
Absolutely. I've heard so many conversations, not just from clients, but even family members, where they've spoke about, either themselves or their partner checking their phone and checking their emails for who they're speaking to and or bringing them up constantly at work. And you think, well, where's that coming from? Why is that distrust there? Why is it built up to the level now that you're being checked upon, or you feel like you need to check up on your partner to that extent? It doesn't bode well for the future at all, does it?
No, and it just creates fear, and ultimately that too becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the guy that was never going to look at anybody else can sometimes be pushed into doing that very thing because she's behaving in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can cause it yourself. So everything I talk about is about balance. It's all about balance. It's like you say, the healthy boundaries, not trusting and giving everything immediately, but at the same time not being suspicious and and distrusting either.
No, I mean, nobody likes to be accused of ogling other women or other men when they're not actually doing that, or accused of just because they've arrived a bit late from work that they might be hooking up with somebody. They don't want that sort of thrown at them every 5 minutes, do they?
No, there's a question I get my clients to ask quite regularly. So if you feel like you're about to do a behavior that you're not sure about, it's asking yourself if you're coming from love or fear. You know, is this behavior coming from love or is it coming from fear? So if you're checking a phone, it's fear that they're doing something that, you know, the reality is with cheating, if they're going to cheat, they're going to cheat. You can't stop that. It's just for you to find it out as quick as possible and move on.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
there'll be signs there.
Some people say, you know, I'll never trust men. What I say, you can trust everyone, because you can trust a cheater will always cheat. You can trust a liar will always lie.
Yeah.
You can trust a gambler will always gamble. So people will always show you their true colours quite sooner rather than later. So I always say trust everybody, and just be open to observing, you know, how things unfold in a relationship.
Yeah, and it's why one of the things I talk about as well is it's really common, and I was the same. I was really bad for it, which is just over investing really quickly, over investing emotionally and time and everything before that relationship's had a chance to really get roots and grow. And that's where you can end up in trouble, because when something does happen, it feels that much more painful because we've over invested too quickly.
Yeah, I always advise my female clients to let the man take the lead in terms of the investment. I always think it's a good idea to be guided by where they're currently at, and not push him to be thinking that you want to get married next week and have kids when he's not probably ready for that immediately. But he is, starting to invest in the relationship, because it can be quite off-putting, to a guy to feel like you're coming on really strong in terms of what you want, in terms of that ultimate long-term relationship. But if you allow him to take charge and lead, you'll find that it'll happen sooner rather than later. Naturally, he'll become invested in you and want to steer the relationship to a stronger level of commitment.
Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously being upfront about what you want and clear on your desires, but not then trying to control when, how, what, Yeah,
let go of that. Let go of the when, the how, and the what, and just allow him to lead and set the pace. So what do you think are the most common, from your experience of talking to women, are the common trust issues that they tell you about that are problem areas?
With dating, the common things, it's more like sweeping statements like, I can't trust men, all men are X, all men are Y, whatever that all men are, liars, cheaters, commitment phobes.
Yeah.
These are like common things that women say. And so it's not necessarily that the trust has come up, it's like they go into it with it. So when I'm talking to them, they've already got it, they've already got that belief that they can't be trusted. Or, as I said, the other trust issue is then just not trusting themselves to make the right decision, or trusting themselves to read a situation, or notice the red flag, or more importantly, take action on the red flag and either finish it, or have a courageous conversation and say, that what isn't working for you. And also trusting to be vulnerable, like that's massive. A lot of women struggle to be vulnerable, and a lot of women don't really understand what vulnerability is, because vulnerability is not going on a first date and spilling your guts about your whole love history and every bad thing that's happened to you. That's not vulnerability.
No.
But it is about expressing how you feel and just giving them like little windows in the early stages of who you really are, and maybe if you've got an underlying silliness or a little fear about something, but it's not major. They're just like little insights into who you really are, rather than a facade or a mask. And I can't remember what the acronym is, but you know, I'm very guilty of doing this, where my partner says, "How are you?" and I say, "Fine." Fine does not mean fine.
No.
And it's learning to say, well, actually, I'm not fine, and this is what's going on for me. And that can feel really vulnerable, because you're not sure what's going to happen. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. You don't know necessarily what they're going to say, and that's what makes it feel scary, because you're unsure, and it can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable, because you're sharing stuff and it might be about them, or it might be about you, or sharing something that you feel it may be slightly embarrassed about. You know, that's all vulnerability. And then trusting in a relationship. Obviously, I have had trust issues around fidelity, where there actually has been there has been some infidelity. It's rebuilding that trust after that's happened. That's a whole nother story. And as I said at the beginning, that kind of trusting with your emotions and being vulnerable again. I think it's back to that being vulnerable. I can't remember who it was. I remember her talking about when that communication breaks down and you stop connecting emotionally, it's like there's clear glass between you and it starts to mist up. And eventually that mist gets so thick that you can't see each other anymore. And that's where relationships start to break down. So yeah, they're the things I've seen most of in apart from things like not trusting them to get the right brand shopping, not trusting them to load the dishwasher properly. Not, there's the kind of more silly stuff, although that can still cause arguments.
Yeah, and don't we get bogged down with things like that when we, actually, why don't we just, is it a life or death situation? No. If he's loaded the dishwasher differently to how you do it, so what? At least he's loaded it and helped out.
Yeah, exactly. You got to look at the outcome. Did it get done? Yes. Yeah. Did it get done quite the way you wanted it? No. But does it matter? No.
I can remember there's a great story where a woman was complaining about her husband doing something completely different to the way she would, and she'd left him in charge of the kids, and she says, "Oh, make sure the wash and bath before they get to bed." And what she found out he'd done was she found out he'd hosepiped them in the garden because it was a nice summer's evening, rather than put them in the bath. She was like horrified, that he'd hosepiped them, but they'd had bags of fun, getting hosepiped down instead of jumping in the bath. And he'd done the job and put them to bed. And I thought actually, that just typifies, doesn't it? Men and women, how we do things differently. But for him, he thought it was great, that his way of doing it.
There is a YouTube video, I can't remember what it's called, and it's this guy and girl, and they kind of play pranks on each other, but him more than her. Like, they're married with children, and like she says to him, "Go and get the child's going to nursery, go and get him a lunchbox." And he goes into Tesco's or whatever, and he realizes they're like a £5, so they're like really expensive, and he's like, "I'm not doing that." So he goes to a hardware store and he buys a little case that has lots of little, like, where you put your nuts and screws in. And he brings that back, and she's like, "What is that?" He's like, "Well, it was only £2, and it now means you can like put your grapes in one bit and your cracker bits in another bit and the raisins in the other bit." And it is a comical, it's meant to be funny, and it really, some of it's outrageous, but it kind of does show like more masculine mentality and problem solving compared to women, and it's hilarious. But I think it's just allowing that to, like you say, unless it's a real health and safety issue or it's endangering someone, it's fine.
It's allowing and also appreciating, you might not be the way you do it, as your way might not be the way he does it, but it's his way, it's the way he thinks, and he's unless it's, as I say, harming your children or other people or the planet, what's the big deal?
My one of our deals in our house is that if I cook, he cleans up, and when all the children are with us, he'll get them to do it. And there's a part that goes, "Oh, I can't believe it, cheeky, what's that, so and so." And then I'm thinking, that's pretty cool though, that he's just delegated that I mean, he watches them and he kind of stands there and gives the orders and tells them how to do it, which, is great for their life skills. But I just wouldn't necessarily have done that. But it's not wrong. Like you say, it is different. It's comical.
Yeah, love that. So on that note, Tabitha Jane, what is your best way for our audience to get in touch with you should they want to reach out?
So Tabitha Jane, I've got a Facebook page. I'm on LinkedIn, and also I do have a free Facebook group called the Love Lounge, which I share videos and interviews with such lovely people like you, and there's questions, and I've even recorded a men's panel recently answering women's questions, like men answering women's questions. So the Love Lounge, or just find me on social media, Tabitha Jane. It's probably the easiest way to get hold of me, because all my my email and phone number are on the Facebook page.
Excellent. And any other information we'll make sure is included in the show notes as always anyway. So thank you so much, Tabitha. I've really enjoyed that conversation, and I'm sure we'll have lots more going forward on other episodes that we can delve into. So thank you very much for your wisdom and your insights around the subject of how to overcome trust issues.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Lyn. It's been awesome.
So it just leaves me to say that when I leave you, it is around true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.